In the rapidly shifting landscape of American politics, the Democratic Party finds itself at a crossroads, grappling with a series of significant events that could redefine its future. Recent commentary from influential figures including Charlamagne the God has painted a grim picture of the party's current state. He stated, "If I was a Democrat, I wouldn't even speak for the party right now because the party is in shambles. The party is in disarray." This sentiment resonates with many, as a recent Quinnipiac poll revealed a startlingly low approval rating of just 21% for Democrats in Congress, the lowest recorded in history. This discontent within the party is particularly palpable among traditional, old-school liberal members who align with the values espoused by former presidents like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. These individuals are increasingly frustrated by what they see as a divergence from the Democratic Party's foundational commitment to championing the working class and the marginalized. They are critical of the current leadership's fixation on woke initiatives, which they believe detracts from pressing socioeconomic issues such as rising living costs and public safety. The rise of Donald Trump has undeniably influenced the party's trajectory. Since his announcement to run for president in 2015, Democrats have often found themselves in reactionary mode, prioritizing opposition to Trump over addressing the needs of their constituents. This shift in focus has led to an erosion of the party's core messaging and has left many voters feeling neglected. As Douglas McKinnon, a former White House official, articulates, "Every ounce of the energy and brainpower of these Democratic leaders seemed to be redirected to wrecking Trump's first administration." This strategy, however, has not yielded favorable results. The Democratic Party's inability to pivot back to key issues following Trump's re-election has left many voters disillusioned. The party's current platform appears to hinge on a singular theme: "We hate Trump," a tactic that critics argue is unsustainable and detrimental. In a parallel narrative, the recent Wisconsin Supreme Court election underscored the potential for a Democratic resurgence, challenging the narrative of decline. Despite significant financial backing from Elon Musk for Republican candidate Brad Schimel, the election concluded with a decisive victory for the Democratic-backed Susan Crawford. The outcome has been interpreted as a rejection of Musk's influence and a signal that voters are increasingly discerning about the motivations behind campaign spending. Ben Wickler, chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, framed the election as a referendum on Trump and Musk, declaring it a blinking red light for the Republican Party. The results suggest a shifting political landscape where even traditionally Republican strongholds are becoming more competitive. Nikki Fried, chair of the Florida Democratic Party, echoed this sentiment, asserting that the results indicate growing voter rejection of Trump's controversial agenda. Meanwhile, the political chaos continues to unfold, with Trump's recent dismissal of National Security Agency Director Timothy Haw and his deputy Wendy Noble. This move has drawn sharp criticism from Democratic lawmakers who argue that it jeopardizes national security at a time of heightened cyber threats. Senator Mark Warner expressed concern, stating, "At a time when the United States is facing unprecedented cyber threats, how does firing him make Americans any safer?" This incident further complicates the political climate, as it reflects an administration willing to prioritize loyalty over expertise. As the 2026 midterm elections approach, the Democratic Party is at a pivotal moment. The contrasting narratives of decline and potential resurgence highlight the complexities of today's political environment. Democrats must reconcile their internal divisions and re-establish a cohesive platform that resonates with a broad base of voters. The next steps taken will be crucial in determining whether the party can reclaim its identity and effectively challenge the ongoing influence of Trump and his allies. As the political landscape continues to evolve, one thing remains clear: the Democratic Party must navigate these turbulent waters with both strategy and purpose if it hopes to reclaim its former prominence in the evolving landscape of American politics. The implications of Donald Trump's "Make America Great Again" slogan continue to provoke discussion and debate. Recent interpretations suggest that the phrase resonates with a nostalgic yearning for a past marred by social and racial divisions, echoing sentiments from a time long before the civil rights movements. As the nation approaches the mid-2025 elections, the stakes are higher than ever, with Republicans struggling to mobilize their base and Democrats capitalizing on recent electoral successes. William Nix, a former vice president of marketing and government affairs for the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County, recently articulated a provocative perspective on Trump's slogan, suggesting it symbolizes a desire to revert to a time characterized by systemic discrimination and social stratification. In his opinion piece, Nix notes that discussions with Republican colleagues reveal a troubling ambiguity regarding when exactly America was great. He surmises that many may be nostalgic for the 1950s or even earlier eras that were defined by exclusionary practices against African Americans and other marginalized groups. Trump wants to take us back to a time of fear and hatred, Nix argues, raising concerns over the potential resurgence of divisive ideologies. This narrative of regression is compounded by recent political developments. On the legislative front, Senate Republicans have approved a budget framework that extends significant tax cuts introduced during Trump's first term while simultaneously proposing drastic spending reductions. The bill, described by Trump as a big beautiful bill, passed narrowly with notable dissent from within the party, highlighting fractures in Republican unity. Critics, including Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, have condemned the legislation as a measure designed to benefit the wealthy at the expense of vital social services, warning that it could deepen economic disparities. Amid these political maneuvers, the Republican Party faces an alarming trend: a decline in voter turnout among their traditional base, particularly during off-year elections. Recent special elections have seen Democrats outperform expectations, flipping seats and indicating a shifting political landscape. The GOP's reliance on low-propensity voters, those who do not consistently turn out for elections, has raised alarms among party strategists. Vice President J.D. Vance emphasized the need for the GOP to learn from its past mistakes and adapt its strategies to engage these voters effectively. Polling data further complicates the picture, revealing a significant segment of the electorate disapproving of Trump's tariffs and viewing his economic policies as erratic. As the GOP navigates these challenges, they must contend with the reality that the Democratic Party appears to be gaining momentum, energized by grassroots movements and a renewed commitment to voter engagement. As 2025 unfolds, the specter of deconstruction looms over American democracy, as Nix describes, reflecting a growing concern among many observers regarding the erosion of democratic norms and values. The upcoming elections will serve as a critical litmus test for both parties as they grapple with their identities and the direction of the nation. The implications of Trump's policies and rhetoric will undoubtedly shape voter sentiments, potentially redefining the political landscape for years to come. In conclusion, as the political climate becomes increasingly polarized, both parties must confront the realities of their respective bases and the evolving priorities of the electorate. While Republicans strive to unify their supporters and drive turnout, Democrats are poised to capitalize on their recent successes. The coming months will be crucial not only for the immediate electoral battles but also for the long-term trajectory of American democracy itself. In a significant move that could reshape the fiscal landscape of the United States, Senate Republicans have successfully passed a budget framework aimed at extending tax cuts originally implemented during President Donald Trump's administration. The vote, which took place early Saturday morning following a marathon session, saw the resolution approved by a narrow margin of 51 to 48, primarily along party lines. This development not only underscores the Republican Party's commitment to Trump's economic agenda but also sets the stage for potential fiscal shifts that could reverberate through the economy in coming years. The newly approved budget blueprint is designed to facilitate large-scale tax breaks and significant cuts in government spending, with Trump labeling it as his big beautiful bill. The plan is expected to extend the $5.7 trillion in tax reductions initiated by the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and includes provisions to raise the federal debt ceiling by $5 trillion. This debt increase is critical as it must be approved before Congress breaks for summer recess to avoid a default on the nation's existing $36.6 trillion debt. As the session unfolded, the debate became contentious, reflecting deep partisan divides. Notably, two Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine and Rand Paul of Kentucky, broke ranks voting against the measure. The session was marked by an extensive vote-a-rama where Democrats proposed over 20 amendments aimed at curbing spending cuts and protecting social programs. However, most of these amendments, which included bans on tax cuts for the wealthy and measures to rescind Trump's controversial tariffs, were rejected by Republican senators. Republican leaders defended the budget plan, arguing that allowing the 2017 tax cuts to expire would equate to a significant tax increase for average Americans. Senate Budget Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham emphasized that failure to continue these cuts would result in a 22% tax hike for many taxpayers. In contrast, Democrats argued that the proposed tax benefits disproportionately favor the wealthy, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer labeling the bill as poison and predicting backlash from voters once they realize its implications. The economic context surrounding this legislation is fraught with challenges. The implementation of Trump's tariffs on foreign goods has already created turmoil in global markets, raising concerns about a potential recession and increasing costs for American consumers. Analysts estimate that the new budget framework could add approximately $5.7 trillion to the national debt over the next decade, a figure Republicans contest, claiming a more conservative estimate of $1.5 trillion. As the budget plan moves to the House of Representatives, it faces potential hurdles. House Republicans have expressed a desire for more stringent fiscal measures, raising questions about how the Senate's more expansive approach will be reconciled. The stark differences between the House and Senate on fiscal restraint and spending cuts highlight the complexities within the GOP as various factions vie for influence over the party's direction. Looking forward, the implications of this budget resolution are profound, potentially affecting social services, tax policy, and federal spending priorities for years to come. With the upcoming House vote set to determine the fate of this ambitious agenda, all eyes will be on how Republican leaders navigate the internal divisions while attempting to maintain their legislative momentum. As the political landscape continues to evolve, the impact of these fiscal decisions will be closely watched by both supporters and detractors alike, each anticipating the consequences of what many are calling a pivotal moment in U.S. economic policy. In a significant political shift, more Republicans in the U.S. Senate are expressing support for increased congressional oversight on tariffs, reflecting a growing desire for accountability within the party. This evolution comes in the wake of heightened scrutiny regarding the implications of tariff policies on the economy and international relations, especially as the 2024 election approaches. The renewed interest in oversight underscores a broader trend within the Republican Party, where lawmakers are beginning to prioritize checks and balances in trade policy. Senate Republicans have increasingly voiced concerns about the unilateral power wielded by the executive branch in imposing tariffs. A recent statement from Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming encapsulates this sentiment. While we support strong trade policies, we must ensure that Congress has a say in decisions that impact American businesses and consumers. This highlights a significant pivot from the previously more laissez-faire attitude regarding executive trade powers as lawmakers grapple with the economic fallout from ongoing trade conflicts. The push for greater oversight has been partly fueled by the economic consequences of recent tariffs, which have led to rising prices for consumers and difficulties for certain industries. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum have raised costs for manufacturers, resulting in job losses in various sectors. As the Senate contemplates potential legislation to rein in tariff authority, the pressure from both constituents and industry groups is mounting. Senator Mitt Romney of Utah has been vocal in advocating for a more collaborative approach, stating, "We need to bring Congress back into the conversation about tariffs. It's our job to ensure that any trade policy is in the best interest of the American people." His remarks reflect a growing consensus among Senate Republicans that the ramifications of trade policies warrant a more measured and inclusive decision-making process. This shift is not occurring in a vacuum. It comes on the heels of significant congressional wins for Republicans in special elections. For instance, in Florida, State Senator Randy Fine secured a congressional seat by a 14-point margin, showcasing strong Republican turnout and support for the party's agenda. This victory not only reinforces GOP control but also illustrates the electorate's appetite for candidates who align closely with party leadership and Donald Trump's policies. Republican Party Chairman Evan Power noted, "What we saw yesterday was a clear message from voters. They want to send support for Trump in Washington. As Republicans celebrate these victories, they are simultaneously confronting the need for a robust internal dialogue about the future of trade policy. The combination of electoral success and calls for accountability suggests that the GOP may be on the brink of a fundamental re-evaluation of its approach to tariffs and international trade. Looking forward, the evolving stance on tariff oversight could lead to significant legislative developments. With the potential for new laws aiming to limit executive trade powers, future sessions of Congress will likely be marked by intense debates over the balance of authority between the legislative and executive branches. As these discussions unfold, the Republican Party faces the challenge of navigating its base's expectations while addressing the complex realities of global trade dynamics. The outcomes of these deliberations may well shape not only the party's future direction but also the broader economic landscape as the nation heads into the next election cycle. In this context, the interplay between electoral strategy and policy reform will be critical in determining how effectively Republicans can position themselves as both champions of trade and stewards of accountability in government. The next steps will be watched closely by constituents and industry stakeholders alike, eager to see how this new chapter in Republican leadership unfolds. In a significant ruling that could shape the landscape of educational funding in the United States, the Supreme Court has sided with the Trump administration, allowing it to proceed with the cancellation of federal teacher training grants in 8 states. This decision, issued on April 4, 2025, comes in the wake of a temporary restraining order from a district court that mandated the continuation of these grants, which are crucial for teacher training programs focused on math, science, and special education. The ruling was delivered in a tightly contested 5-4 vote, with the majority concluding that the lower court lacked jurisdiction over the state's claims. This decision marks the first substantial ruling by the Supreme Court regarding a Trump executive action during his second term, indicating the court's potential willingness to support similar cases involving the cancellation of federal grants and contracts previously authorized by Congress. The court's assigned per curiam opinion noted the states have represented in this litigation that they have the financial wherewithal to keep their programs running. So if they ultimately prevail, they can recover any wrongfully withheld funds through suit in an appropriate forum. This assertion reflects the majority's belief that the states would not suffer irreparable harm from the withholding of funds while litigation progresses. The 8 states affected, California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, New York, and Wisconsin, argued that the abrupt cancellation of these grants violated the Administrative Procedures Act, which mandates proper notice and impact assessments before such significant policy changes can occur. The Trump administration had terminated the grants totaling over $600 million nationwide, citing concerns over diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the programs. Dissenting opinions from Justices Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson highlighted the ruling's potential negative impact on educational programs. Justice Kagan described the majority's decision as a mistake, emphasizing that the termination of these grants has already forced states to curtail vital teacher training programs. She elaborated, "The states challenging the termination of the grants do say that the termination of the grant will force them, indeed has already forced them, to curtail teacher training programs." Justice Jackson criticized the majority's eagerness to intervene prematurely in ongoing litigation, labeling the ruling as unprincipled and unfortunate. She argued that the immediate harm to the states was tangible. citing specific instances where school districts had to make staffing cuts due to the loss of grant funding. Jackson expressed concern that the court's expedited ruling undermined the normal judicial process and could set a troubling precedent for future cases. The Trump administration's argument for the emergency intervention stemmed from a desire to prevent what it described as an overreach by federal courts into executive funding decisions. Acting Solicitor General Sarah Harris warned that continued federal court involvement could lead to a chaotic situation where courts dictate funding for programs seen as inconsistent with the interests of the United States. As the implications of this ruling unfold, it raises critical questions about the balance of power between state and federal governments in education funding and the extent to which the executive branch can unilaterally alter established programs. The decision is likely to reverberate through ongoing legal challenges surrounding other federal grants and contracts. Looking ahead, the future of teacher training funding remains uncertain as states and educational institutions grapple with the immediate fallout from this ruling. The Supreme Court's willingness to entertain such emergency requests may lead to further challenges as similar cases arise, potentially reshaping the landscape of federal education policy in the months and years to come. With ongoing litigation and the political climate surrounding education funding, stakeholders will be watching closely to see how this ruling influences both policy and practice in the field of education.